You have got to be kidding me. It is the first week of September and we're already dealing with injury news? Are you joking? Yeah, we're going to talk about all that and the Ducks' latest signing in response to that in this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, this is enough to just pull my hair out. But welcome everyone to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for over a decade, and today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download Game Time, create an account, and use code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? Game time. So it is not even the first weekend of September. Well, it kind of is. And we just had some news come across the wire that is not particularly good. Now, the Ducks have been bitten by the injury bug quite a bit over the last few seasons. Normally, we see these kind of news take place right around training camp or early in the summer when there's some kind of surgery or something else going on. Usually that happens. Yeah, not this time, not in this case, because we are just a week away from first meaningful hockey for the Ducks, and that is the rookie showcase taking place down the street at El Segundo. But there's some pretty bad news because not one, but two players that are on that roster are now injured, as we just found out. So we're going to start with, I think, the biggest one, and that is Beckett Sennecke, who unfortunately, while he was working out or while he was training during the offseason, he got a broken foot, or rather, according to the Ducks press release, he suffered a foot fracture during off-season training, and he is expected to be out approximately 6 to 8 weeks. That puts a timetable of the third week of October into the beginning of November. So what does that injury mean for the Anaheim Ducks? Okay, well, that one's big. That is a significant injury because that's your number 3 pick. That is your golden goose from this season's NHL draft, and now he is out for essentially the first couple of months of the season, and that all but guarantees that he is going to rehab in juniors. And at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he spends the majority or the entirety of this season down in juniors. Now, there was the rumor that he was going to play in juniors anyway. This rumor has been out there since the NHL draft back in June. But there was a little bit of rumbling. Oh, he might get 9 games. He might get a few games with the Ducks. He will probably mature very well and just have a breakout season. Well, this injury might hinder that big time because he's not going to get the training camp that he wants. He's not going to be able to get in those on-ice workouts that he so desperately wanted. And frankly, someone of his caliber and someone with that kind of ceiling, they need this. They need this kind of off-season action, especially during the rookie tournament where he's competing against players his own age and a little bit older. The majority of the players are going to be 18, 19, 20. So most of them are going to be older than him. And now he's out. Now he's absolutely out, and it completely stinks. What else does it mean? Well, I would say that juniors are going to happen no matter what. Was I hoping for a big season from him in juniors? Yes. Now that's really going to hinder that. He's going to miss rookie challenge. He's going to miss training camp. I cannot emphasize how important training camp is to a player. I emphasized this last season as well. Let's rewind a little bit, and you could see why I'm a little bit worried here. Last season, there was one current Duck and one former Duck that missed pretty much the entirety of training camp due to contract stuff. Jamie Drysdale, he missed pretty much every pre-draft workout. So he missed a lot of that with the team, didn't have enough time to gel with the team, and the little time he had was fine, but then he got injured and he was kind of set back a little bit. So Jamie Drysdale missing pretty much all of training camp, that really was not good. And then Trevor Zegras. Now, he dealt with injuries almost all of last season, him not training as much as he would like with the team last season, him not signing that contract until deep in the preseason. That took a long time, and that took a lot out of his training from last season. Who knows if it may have contributed to him getting hurt? Who knows? I mean, I'm not going to say that that's a direct correlation, but, maybe there's that 1% chance that if he had had a full preseason, a full training camp, maybe he would have been in a little bit better shape going into the season, but who knows? But the point is, missing training camp is never good. So for someone of Sennecke's caliber, someone with his type of skill and energy, it sucks. It really does. So I consider that a pretty big blow for the Ducks organizationally. That's a big blow. So when will we see Sennecke? Who knows if we see Beckett this season in a Ducks jersey? I would expect him to have almost all his time in juniors. Yeah, c'est la vie. Okay, we're going to head to the first intermission right now. We're not done. There's another injury that took place and a subsequent signing that took place in relation to that. We will get to that on the other side. And now, a brief word from eBay Motors. And folks, if you haven't used eBay Motors before, then you know what I'm going to say. Passion, drive, and patience. Patience, super underlined here, Ducks fans, is the formula for winning championships and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason J.D. Hernandez as we navigate the injury bug in September. Why are we used to this, Ducks fans? Why are we absolutely used to the Ducks just getting a slew of injuries? It's like we've seen this in the recent past, even as early as last season. Leo Carlsson, he was injured and missed quite a few games last season. How about Alex Killorn? He was out for a ton of games last season. Oh boy, how about Pavel Mintyukov? He was out for a little bit as well. Then you had Trevor Zegras, who was out for pretty much the entirety of the season, it seems like. Even Frank Vatrano and Troy Terry, they got a little bit banged up last season. Radko Gudas. Okay, Mason McTavish, he got hurt and banged up a little bit last season as well. And I don't even need to get you started on the young defenseman, Tristan Luneau, Noah Warren. Yeah, just so many guys getting hurt. Yeah, it stinks. But now that I mentioned that, we have another one. We have another pretty significant injury in the organization, that is. And that is San Diego Gulls goaltender Tomas Suchanek, who had successful surgery to repair a ruptured ACL and is expected to be out approximately 6 to 8 months. That one stings. big time. Suchanek, I thought, was pretty impressive last season. Probably one of the lone bright spots for the San Diego Gulls last season. Last season, in his rookie year with the San Diego Gulls, the young Czech goaltender went 14, 10, and 5 with 3 shutouts and a 292 goals against and a save percentage of 910, which is slightly above league average. League average was 909, so he was just above that, but I will take it. And as far as Suchanek is concerned, he was one of those guys that kind of saved the season, because early on in the season, it was expected that Calle Clang was going to be the number one goaltender for the San Diego Gulls, or in the words of John Broadbent, who covers the Gulls for Defend the Nest, he said, Woo Clang. That's what he called him. But Clang wound up having a not so good season. He got off to a not great start. Some pretty bad losses early in the season. There was a significantly bad loss at Coachella Valley for Calle Clang early in the season, and he just got on a bad streak. I mean, he went on, I want to say, like a 10 or 11 streak where he didn't win a game. And because of that, he was relegated to the side. So in enters Suchanek, just kind of, not, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but he just kind of appeared as if the clouds, the heavens had parted, and here was this new goaltender that was doing pretty well for himself. Clang, who wound up with an 897 save percentage, he wound up not having any shutouts and kind of had a disappointing season. That's the term I'm going to use. But for Suchanek, he was terrific to start off with. He even had a nice little streak going around the holidays and even into January. Remember when the Gulls had that little bit of a streak going in January and February when they were playing a bunch of Midwestern teams? And Suchanek got win after win after win after win. He was terrific. And that also included a shutout against the Rockford Ice Hogs and a shutout against the Calgary Wranglers. Yeah. So he was kind of on one. And even just giving the Gulls a chance and giving them a little bit of hope in February when they were not in last place, by the way. Remember, the Gulls did not finish in last place. They actually were a little bit more respectable this season compared to last year, and Suchanek was a big part of that. And he even had a couple of pretty solid games against the Coachella Valley Firebirds. I'm going to talk about the final game of the season for a brief second, because I thought Suchanek was brilliant in that final game, and this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I saw just right in front of me. Suchanek had a little bit better quickness. The reflexes were right there. The lateral movement was superb on him. His puck tracking ability, I thought, was very good in that game, especially during the second and third periods when the Firebirds just kept peppering him with shot after shot after shot. 3 of them did get through in the third period, but especially that second period where San Diego just pretty much stopped playing. They did. And what happened there? Well, Suchanek happened. And he was brilliant in that one. And it did essentially turn into, actually I have my score sheet right here. So shots on goal after one period was 10-6 in favor of the Firebirds. Not too bad. The following 2 periods, periods 2 and 3, the Firebirds outshot the San Diego Gulls 33-9. He saw 33 shots in those 2 periods. Yeah, are you freaking joking me? Now, the Gulls did go on to win that game, and that was really because of Suchanek. They went all the way to a shootout, and he was brilliant against Devon Shore, Logan Morrison. Oh, that's right. He stopped El Capitan, Max McCormick, as well, and that was the Sasha Pastujov game-winning goal in the shootout. A great way to end the season, and I love the way that the season ended. Suchanek really went balls out on that game, gave it everything he had, and stayed positive throughout that entire game. And the way he celebrated and the way the team celebrated him to keep the Gulls in it, to keep that shootout as a bagel for the Firebirds. Now, yeah, that game didn't mean anything for the Firebirds in the grand scheme of things because their number one seed was already locked in. But still stopping all three of those guys. And those are three pretty solid names too. Devin Shore, that's an NHL caliber player right there. Max McCormick, that's their captain. Logan Morrison, another guy with NHL experience as well, someone that could wind up in the NHL. Those are three top scorers, and Suchanek stopped all three of them. He was brilliant. And it was games like that where I think the Gulls are going to miss him terribly. Absolutely terribly. He was the Gulls' best goaltender this past season. The expectation was that he was going to take over that number one role in San Diego and would wind up becoming essentially the third goalie in the depth chart for the Anaheim Ducks because he was that good for a good chunk of last season. And now they don't have that. Now organizationally, the Ducks have John Gibson, Lukáš Dostal, and then what? Well, I will tell you after the second intermission. Stay locked in. And now, a brief word from the Game Time app. And folks, if you haven't used Game Time before, then what are you waiting for? Because I have used Game Time on a number of occasions, including several baseball games, basketball games. So I've used Game Time for a plethora of sporting events. And they have a new feature called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. So that pretty much filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And they also have, the super deal. They have, all-in pricing. You can get Angels tickets for $5, $6 all in. That's amazing. That even includes club seats as well. So, what are you waiting for? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Woo. Welcome back to episode number 920 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. We've got one more bit of news that we've got to talk about, and this is related to the injuries, and that's a signing that took place. And actually, this signing makes a lot of sense considering that Suchanek is likely out for the entirety, most likely the entirety of this coming season. The Ducks/Gulls signed Oscar Dansk to a 1-year, 2-way contract. So that part's very important. I'll tell you why in a second. But first off, about Oscar Dansk, he last played for the Calgary Wranglers. He'd spent a cup of coffee in the National Hockey League, very few games with the Golden Knights. He previously played with the Chicago Wolves back in 18, 19, and 20. Had some solid games with his time with the Chicago Wolves. Then he played for the Henderson Silver Knights, and he was the main backup goalie to Dustin Wolf once the Stockton Heat moved up to Calgary to become the Wranglers. So that was their backup goalie for the last couple seasons, backing up the two-time goaltender of the year, Dustin Wolf. In 44 games with the Calgary Wranglers, he compiled a record of 19, 18, and 5, with the save percentage just north of 900, a goals against just around or just under 3 goals allowed per game. Not bad for a backup goaltender, to be honest. So now this begs a question. What does this do for the Ducks organizationally as far as goaltending depth? Well, right now the Ducks have John Gibson. They have Lukáš Dostal. They used to have a pretty solid pipeline of goaltending even a few years ago when Lukáš Dostal was your number one goalie for San Diego. I mean, this was even a couple of years ago that Lukáš Dostal was your number one. Even early last season, your number one goalie, or actually not last season, the year before, so it was 2 years ago. he was your main number one goalie with the San Diego Gulls. And now he's the main backup to John Gibson. But after that, who's your number one for San Diego? It would have been Suchanek, and he would have been the number 3 goalie as far as the organization is concerned. Now you've got essentially 2 backup goaltenders. Who's going to be the number 1 goalie? Is it going for San Diego? Is it going to be Calle Clang? Is it going to be Oscar Dansk? If I were to predict, I'm going to say that maybe Dansk gets the nod in this one. Oscar has had some NHL experience. He's done a little bit better overall than Calle Clang. Clang had not so great of a season last year. He's going to have a monster training camp in order to get that number 1 goalie spot for the San Diego Gulls and the de facto number 3 goalie for the Ducks. And the Ducks are not immune to injury problems, as you can clearly see at some point this season. And I'm not just saying this to have doom and gloom. I'm saying this because this has happened several times over the previous 3 seasons in Anaheim, where one of the 2 goalies winds up getting injured for a few games at some point during the season. We saw John Gibson get hurt for a little bit, so you saw Lukáš Dostal become the number 1, and you saw just someone else become the backup. There was a time where Anthony Stolarz was the number 3 goalie, and this was back in 2019 and 2020. Remember when John Gibson was number 1 and Ryan Miller was your backup goalie? And then after that, it was Anthony Stolarz as your number 3. Fast forward a little bit. And then you had Stolarz backing up John Gibson. And you had Lukáš Dostal. Remember when Lukáš Dostal was a number 3 goalie organizationally? And remember how big a deal it was when Lukáš Dostal finally made his way up to the National Hockey League? That was supposed to be this kind of year for Suchanek. And now with that knee injury, which one's going to be the number 3? And if I'm going to be honest, I'm not as excited about the number 3 as I was in years past. To make this clear, I'm not saying that either of those guys is going to have a bad season. What I am saying is traditionally, especially the last couple seasons, they have been primarily backup goaltenders for their respective American teams. Oscar Dansk was a backup to a world-class goalie in Dustin Wolf. He's been backing him up. Calle Clang wound up becoming a backup to Tomas Suchanek last season. So essentially you have 2 backup goaltenders, and which one is it going to be? Is it going to be Dansk? Is it going to be Clang? Who knows? So anyway, the 2-way deal, that does mean that he can move up and down in case there is an injury with the Ducks goaltending. It could come this season like it has the last 3 seasons, really the last 4 seasons where there's been some kind of injury. I'm just saying it's happened quite a bit. You never know. Injuries happen. All right, so that's the last bit of news for the Ducks. Just a quick programming note before we head off. Locked On has been on a bit of a break for the summer. Part of that is because I've been dealing with just health stuff. So that part was not intended. I was not intending to take most of last month off, just to make that clear. We will be taking a few days off. We'll be back on Tuesday with a couple of episodes. And then officially a new season of Locked On Ducks. This will be season 6 of Locked On Ducks. Will begin on Monday, September 16th. That is going to be during the rookie tournament taking place in El Segundo. And I'll talk a little bit more about that next week. In the meantime, that's going to do it for this podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. We are on SiriusXM. We're ad-free on Amazon, so check us out across all those platforms. You can follow me on Twitter X at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. You could email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. And once again, thank you all for your continued support. It is so, so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason J.D. Hernandez saying have a great weekend, folks. Please remember to please be safe out there. Please be kind to one another. And Ducks fly together.